Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Barbara Morton, the Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Barbara, great to see you.
Great to see you as always, Jory. Thanks so much for having me.
Always a pleasure. Now, I think it's really important to look back on the year that was for VA and all things customer experience, a busy year. Why don't you recap some of the highlights? And as we look ahead for 2024, what are you guys looking to further improve on?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've had so many wonderful highlights in the last year. One that I'd love to start with, of course, is moving the needle, continuing to do so on our key measure of trust, which has risen to 79.3%. So we're super thrilled about that. It's veterans reflecting back onto us that they trust us to fulfill our commitment to them. So that's really been an incredible journey for us as an organization to build that trust over time. And when we started measuring trust back in 2015, 2016 timeframe, the percentage of veterans who sort of agreed with that statement of trusting us was at 55%. So the fact that we're at 79% now is really a great testament, I think, to our frontline employees valuing the veteran experience and wanting to deliver those great experiences at every turn.
All right, that's fantastic to see that the numbers are trending in the right direction here. As far as things to look forward to, themes or overarching elements of what CX improvements the VA is going to be focused on in the year ahead, what are you guys keeping the eye on the ball on here?
Yeah, so I think one of the areas that's been really kind of a focus for us, I think also in the last year, but also going forward in the next year, is really related to the president's management agenda. So you're probably aware that there's a customer experience priority area. We're super thrilled about that. And one of those focus areas is really about life experiences that people, member of the public, have. And one of those particular journeys that we've been really focused on, not only at VA, but as a cross-agency team, including siblings from Department of Defense, Department of Labor, Small Business Administration, Education, HUD, all along the gamut, is that transition. And sometimes we know it can be bumpy from transitioning from the military to the civilian world. So we've had a human-centered design sprint and a core co-design team over the last couple of years, really kind of co-creating a solution to help address the pain points that we collectively identified through interviews with transitioning service members, their families, and newly transitioned veterans. And so the prototype that we've come up with is something that I'm really excited about. It's sort of in the initial design phases, but essentially it would be a digital tool that would allow veterans and recently or transitioning service members or their families to sort of sort through and customize different pieces of information from across the federal space. So not just a VA series of resources, but also from those other agencies that I mentioned as well, and really having that customizable solution where they can enter their separation date, maybe what the type of information they're interested in. And this tool will sort of call out all the different aspects, all the noise to really focus in on that customized, personalized solution. So we're really looking forward in the next year to developing a minimum viable product with that tool as well.
That's super exciting because I think the trend for a while now in the space has been this realization that veterans or federal customers more broadly don't necessarily know or need to know the bureaucracy of what agency or what component of what agency delivers that service, that they just know what they want from the government, and that they should be able to meet them halfway, or
Yep.
help them understand the bureaucracy of it all. So just in terms of that timeline and in terms of, where that prototype can be
Mhm.
valuable, can you just shed a little bit more light on, when you guys expect that minimal viable product, and where things go from there?
Yeah, so of course, part of our practice is to test rigorously with our partners and those that it would serve. Obviously, we're designing it based on their feedback. And so we're hopeful by hopefully the end of the calendar year, we will have an MVP to sort of, that has hopefully been not broken or broken, if you will, with all the insights coming back. We want to make sure it fits all the needs, and really just excited to sort of see what that initial response would be for rollout. And to your point, our goal is to sort of make the bureaucracy really invisible to those that we serve. They shouldn't have to understand and navigate all these different agencies and sort of who owns what. They should really be able to have the resources they need at their fingertips to search and sort in a very personalized manner. And so that's really the goal of the tool. And again, hoping by end of calendar year, we will have that MVP in full development.
Really exciting, something to keep an eye on there. Now, of course, VA is not just delivering on better experiences for veterans, which is of course very important and the primary mission of VA, but it is really setting that tone across government in terms of what it means to deliver valuable experiences to the public. And I think one way it's doing that is as a high impact service provider, or
Yep.
HISP, one of a dozen plus agencies or a couple dozen agencies that are designated as HISPs. But I want to hear from your perspective what it means for this agency to be a HISP, and
Mhm.
how that's an effective driver of delivering that better customer experience across government.
Yeah, I mean, I think being designated as a high impact service provider by our siblings over in OMB has been a really important driver for us because you think about it, the direction is coming from the highest levels of the executive branch, again, through the customer experience executive order from that, and also the OMB sort of, President's Management Agenda, A11, Section 280. So we have all these drivers around us that are pointing us collectively in the direction of focusing on customer experience and really looking at it as a co-equal measure of agency performance, along with traditional operational measures like wait time and number of claims processed, number of appointments scheduled. So it's really been just an incredible, sort of moment, I think, for us to really sort of elevate what a high impact service is, really kind of serving as many folks as possible and sort of putting us front and center collectively who are HISPs to say, we're going to put ourselves on the hook for great customer experience, whether it's veteran experience or other experience and services that other agencies are providing. And this is really kind of an area and opportunity for us to prove the concept, us collectively in VA and other agencies as well, to prove the value of experience and how that can bring the services to those that we are providing those services to, better and more efficiently and with more satisfaction as well.
Of course. Yeah. And you were talking at the top here about the improvement in the veteran trust scores, a
Hmm.
very meaningful improvement there and something that's worth celebrating. But
Yeah.
beyond that one metric, which is very important as measuring
Hmm.
improvements, what other metrics, what other
Yeah.
data is the VA looking at when it comes to uh, seeing where it stands with CX and where there's room for improvement still?
Sure. Well, there's always room for improvement, right? So, well, if we were all 100% with experience metrics across the board, we would be out of a job. Hopefully, we'll get there someday. But another kind of key measure of our performance, and this is a framework that we established here at VA back in 2015, 2016, when the Veterans Experience Office was established. And those really are kind of what we call the key drivers of trust. So, trust is our North Star. We want to build lifelong trusted relationships with those we serve. And drivers of that trust are really threefold. The first is wanting to make things as easy for veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors when they interact with us as possible. The second is it effective? Are the services we're providing them giving them what they actually need? Is it really the effectiveness of what they're seeking? And then third, and I think probably most difficult in some respects, but one of the most important features is emotion and making veterans and those that we serve feel like we honor and value their service. So trust is the North Star, ease, effectiveness, and emotion. That is our framework. It's a framework that's replicated, expanded upon in the OMB A11 circular, Section 280 as well. So it's consistent across. And it really provides us at VA an opportunity to understand what we collectively mean when we talk about the veteran experience using those core drivers and that particular framework.
And if I could offer this up, I think that one thing that VA has been looking pretty carefully at is this link, this positive correlation between the
Hmm.
experience and the employee satisfaction, and how that has an impact on the services that it provides public facing to veterans. Could you just break that down a little bit, shed a little bit more light on one, what the VA has found there, and
Yeah.
two, what they're doing about that revelation?
Absolutely. So it's really interesting. I'll go back in time, if you'll time travel with me for a moment here. So when we first stood up the Veterans Experience Office, the sort of external facing experience, the veteran experience itself has really been our focus primarily. Fast forward though, through the years, starting back probably in like 2020 or so timeframe, we really wanted to also start to think about what you raised, which is that sort of synergy and dependency of employee experience and veteran experience. If employees are feeling valued and like they are, able to trust their leadership using that same framework, it's easy for them and effective for them to deliver what they need to deliver, and they're able to connect with the mission and purpose with each other as coworkers or with those they serve directly, it makes perfect logical sense that they would then be able to give that great experience as well. So we use kind of the same framework, and we've started to build that employee experience capability inside of VA as well, using human-centered design as a core practice, moments that matter, pain points, bright spots, journey maps, and again, survey responses as well. So we're really trying to apply what we learned in the veteran-facing realm to the employee-facing realm as well. And I think, one of the interesting things is, finding a way to showcase from a data perspective, not just the intuitive sense of that relationship, but from a sort of a quantitative metrics data perspective, that causal or correlative relationship. And I think we're just starting to scratch the surface on that. There was an article that we co-authored with our siblings over at OMB about a month ago or so, talking about sort of an initial, sort of promising relationship being shown between great employee experiences and veterans experience as well. So looking forward to building that, kind of connectivity over time too.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that VA has really been a pioneer on when it comes to these better CX experiences in government has been the idea of human-centered design, that it's not the VA guessing what veterans want,
Yes.
bringing them into the fold,
Yep.
having them kick the tires on things, so to speak,
Yep.
and give some feedback on what works, what they would maybe do differently, and then VA incorporating that feedback and building
Yes.
better design.
Yep.
Can you give some examples, some recent examples of that?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked that question. I love examples. So I'll give you a high tech and a low tech example if I can. So high tech example, one of the signals that we've heard over time from veterans and those that use VA is very difficult to navigate, certainly digitally, like lots of different websites historically. Where's the front door? If I don't know where to go, where's the front door? So we sort of have worked with our siblings in VA's Office of Information Technology and Octo, the Chief Technology Officer, to not only revamp the va.gov website, which has happened over the last number of years, but also create VA's first ever flagship mobile app. And that's been an incredible sort of result of the feedback that we've been given from veterans, because we use that human-centered design approach where veterans are telling us specifically, hey, I'd really like to be able to download my decision letters on benefits in a mobile app. I want to be able to refill a prescription. I want to be able to kind of see different types of information. That's how the app has been actually developed, again, co-designing with those that we serve. And the result of that is you can see on the App Store, it receives a 4.8 out of 5-star rating, which I always say this sort of jokingly, but not so jokingly, like it's not because we're special that it has that rating, meaning we in VA, it's not because we're special. It's because we're designing with and for and around the customer. We're giving them what they ask for. And therefore, of course, it generates a super high rating, which is on par with the industry. So I think that's a really incredible product that has been delivered, certainly, and reaching a milestone, I think, of about 2 million downloads, and really just incredible, user experience scores. The low-tech solution is another one that I think is really, really powerful, just this example in itself. So back in March of this year, and I think this is also another highlight of the year, the Secretary announced a change, an update to VA's mission statement. So you may recall the traditional historical mission statement is a Lincoln quote. And Lincoln, one of the greatest presidents and leaders of this country, talked about caring for he who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and for his orphan. I know for myself as a VA employee, the weight of that quote always has meant something to me and given me such purpose. Understanding, though, that there also has been feedback over many years that, hey, is that really representative of kind of the veteran population today? Is there an opportunity to maybe, update it and tweak it so every veteran, and also, by the way, families, caregivers, and survivors can see themselves in that quote? And so our current secretary tapped us on the shoulder and said, you know what, before we VA design a whole new mission statement, can we please go ask veterans, their families, caregivers, survivors, advocates, and by the way, employees, what they would think about this, and kind of what are the hallmarks of a mission statement that are most important, number one, and number two, when we VA draft up a couple of options, can't we just send out a survey and get sort of the feedback as to which ones they prefer, which of the options they prefer? And so we did that last winter, and what the outcome of that was the new mission statement that the Secretary announced in March of 2023 was selected as a preference by men, women, every age group, different races, ethnicities, gender identity, sexual orientation. Just really a powerful example of when you give people sort of the opportunity to share their voices, and then you can kind of translate what you hear into an action you take, it's going to be a great outcome for everybody. So that's how the mission statement informed the secretary's decision to really kind of kind of unroll what the new mission statement is, which is much more sort of inclusive feeling and sounding than the prior one. So that's a low tech example, and one that I think is incredibly powerful as well.
All right, that really covers the gamut. More to talk about here, plenty more to talk about here, but we're going to take a quick break. My guest today is Barbara Morton, the Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman, on excellent, equitable, and secure customer experience, a closer look at high-impact service providers, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. Welcome back to Excellent, Equitable, and Secure Customer Experience, a closer look at high-impact service providers, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. My guest today is Barbara Morton, the Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman. Barbara, I wanted to pick up where we left off in the first segment here. You were talking about this inclusive language for the VA's overall mission statement here. I want to learn a little bit more about how VA approaches this intersection of all things DEIA and CX. Where do you see the overlap?
Yeah, well, so this is such a great question. So one of the things that I think is really fantastic about the practice of customer experience and human-centered design in particular is that it really can sort of support any different type of priority, right? So thinking about this administration, day one equity executive order, super high priority. One of the first things that we recognized early on was that to meet that priority, really you can kind of look at data in static and sort of say, okay, we know that certain populations have, let's say, lower trust than other populations, but that type of quantitative data won't tell you why. What will tell you why is actually talking to the humans, right? Talking to the people doing that human-centered design practice and really understanding what are some of the key drivers of those different experiences. So I think that's, kind of one macro sort of element of how human-centered design and sort of different journey maps and interviews with different cohorts of veterans really enable us collectively, us in VA, to understand their different journeys and how we might be able to respond to them. The other thing I'll say too is I think early on, again, in this administration, when it began a couple of years ago, we saw an opportunity to fold in what we call enhanced demographic data into our currently existing VA-wide trust score. So as you may be familiar with, we have a sort of this quarterly trust survey that we send out to users of VA from all across, whether it's healthcare, benefits, memorials, appeals, et cetera. One of the opportunities we saw is, hey, how might we be able to capture and collect the information on trust? And again, those 3 E's that I talked about, ease, effectiveness, and emotion, by breaking down voluntary demographic selections as well. And I can share, there's additional information about this on performance.gov, which I can share with you and to share with your listeners. But essentially what we wanted to do was baseline, where does trust stand for all these different kind of cohorts of veterans by, I think there were 26 or so different demographic domains that we started to measure. And what you saw over time, over the last 2 years, and this is part of one of VA's agency priority goals, we saw increases in those metrics across a multitude of those different demographics, which to me is a great way to showcase that we can move the needle on trust for different cohorts, also ease, effectiveness, and emotion, when we're able to collect that data and understand how those experiences are for those different folks. So that's something we were really proud to sort of bring to the table. We also have been able to sort of contribute to the VA agency equity plan as well. We've hosted a number of events that really try to target underserved veteran populations, women veterans, et cetera, to really bring in those folks who may not have ever engaged with VA or may have not really been that involved with VA, to see how we might be able to support them.
All right. No, that's a really great look at 2 great areas of focus and where they intersect with each other. In terms of the technology and the tools that VA is using to further this kind of work, what are you guys looking at for the year ahead? I know that you guys are very busy with the AI tech sprints and some ways to help clinicians, have a better experience and spend more time in front of patients. But AI, emerging technology, what are you guys looking at in terms of those drivers of better CX?
Yeah, I mean, I think you raise a really interesting point about AI. I think everybody is incredibly excited about the possibility and opportunity to utilize it, obviously in a protective and responsible way. But I think the sky is really the limit. I mean, the more time that we can put back in the hands of people to interact with people on a human level, to me, the better, all the better for experience. So I think it sort of remains to be seen how AI will help facilitate that. But again, I think as long as we can kind of create the space and more time for people to really connect with each other, low tech solution, but enabled by a potentially high tech solution, I think that's always going to be a great driver of an incredible experience.
Absolutely. It really it strikes me how many hats VA wears in all of this, because we were talking about its designation as a HISP. It's also one of the leads in the president's
Yep.
management agenda on CX, and again setting that tone for the rest of the federal government. Reason I bring that up is that
Mhm.
VA has obviously spent a lot of time and attention and thought to spend, to put together its CX program, but
Yep.
some agencies might be a little earlier in its journey when it comes to these kinds of improvements. So, as a PMA leader on all of this, what would you suggest as some early steps for agencies that
Mm.
are just getting started?
It's such a great question. And I love that question because I know for us at VA, I do feel like we're lucky in the sense of when we started this journey back in 2015, 2016, we had a pretty significant catalyst. And sometimes I feel like transformation needs to be charged by a catalyst, which for us was the Phoenix VA Medical Center access wait time crisis. For our siblings and other agencies, many of whom are sort of armies of one, I definitely empathize because it is very difficult to kind of have this startup momentum with smaller teams. The benefits, though, that I think are in place now that were not in place back in the day when we started was all these, again, these drivers that we talked about. So this executive order, the A11, the PMA, these are incredible authorities to leverage, even as small teams, to sort of point back to leadership to say, hey, this is why this should be a priority, or this is a lens that we should apply, given the fact that this is something that we need to drive across government. So I do feel like we were sort of lucky in the beginning to sort of build that. And in terms of where to start, so one of the resources I love to share is the Customer Experience Cookbook. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's a product that we put together with OMB and other cross-agency siblings to really kind of showcase all the different levers across government that any of us can utilize to sort of create our own CX recipe. But for us, what I can share is we started by defining what experience meant. Again, trust, ease, effectiveness, and emotion. Keep it simple for people to understand. We also baseline measured trust. That was one of the first things this office did. And I can tell you at the time, it was a scary question to ask given the catalyst that sort of had happened. But it gave us a baseline. And as I mentioned, we started at 55% agreement and trust, Likert scale 1 to 5, 4s and 5s. We knew we only had one place to go, which was up. And that was really kind of a good place for us to know where we stood, to understand where we needed to go. The third thing I would say is human-centered design and really proving the concept. You got to prove the concept in a way, at least for us, that is going to make sense for people in the business to sort of add value. So what we did is we started with our siblings in the Veterans Health Administration, who were fully on board and excited about building VA's first ever patient experience program. So applying human-centered design by talking to veterans and understanding the moments that matter most to them in their healthcare journey, the bright spots, the pain points, and then translating those insights, what we heard, into what we did, actions we took, whether that's communications products, training, leadership practices, anything under the sun as quote unquote solutions to empower employees to know how to deliver experiences at the moments that matter most to veterans. So those are the areas that we started with that I would invite my siblings across government to consider as well.
Well, it's always great to check in with you guys and see what you're up to, because you are always up to something new and exciting in this space here. So thanks again, Barbara. Once again, thanks to Barbara Morton, the Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search HISP. That's HISP.